are perhaps familiar with the feeling of shame. If you need the definition of shame, it's a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. Now, shame comes about as a consequence of original sin. Prior to man's fall, prior to shame, St. John Paul II, in his Theology on the Body, speaks to three original experiences: that of original solitude, nakedness, and union. Solitude, not something to be confused with loneliness, is something that God cannot take away, no matter how much we may try. Solitude, in fact, opens up to God, being aware of his love and our complete dependence upon him. Nakedness, or vulnerability, is our ability to see our own human limitations, whether they be physical, mental, or spiritual. And lastly, union is the trust and obedience that we place in another, whether that is a spouse, loved one, family member, neighbor. And it's through that union that we allow ourselves to expose our human limitations to the other, realizing actually that we exist for the other person. But shame, which comes through as a consequence of sin, disfigures all these original experiences. You see, with shame and sin, solitude becomes loneliness. That loneliness, that absence of God in our lives. And rather than living in vulnerability and in union with each other, we end up choosing an alternate reality, one in which we don't have to face our limitations by means of technology, perhaps drug use, consumerism, etc. The Apostle Peter is definitely familiar with this shame. He would be the first to confess Christ's true divinity as the Messiah. Then at the Lord's Supper, the night before Christ would be handed over, he states, "Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death." But yet before the night was over, Peter would deny any knowledge of the Lord, the one he grew to love so much. Not just once, not just twice, but 3 times. The sin and shame, he was trying to protect his own interest, his own well-being. Shame welled up in Peter. Our gospel passage picks up today at the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus makes his third appearance. For Peter, this has to be a deja vu experience. Whether you know it or not, the catching of the fish after a long night of catching anything should spark within us a memory of the first experience Peter had with Jesus. Because it was at that time when he first met Jesus fishing, where he pulled in the large catch, that Peter was first called to be his disciple. And then when Jesus invites Peter and the disciples over for breakfast, it probably sparked some memory of the multiplication of fishes and loaves, probably sparked a memory of that Last Supper he shared with them. And Peter probably remembered at those 2 times specifically, he promised never to leave Jesus' side. These intimate experiences he shared with Christ, who now stands before him in his glorified body, had to be gut-wrenching as he relived those experiences in his mind. In fact, he stands before a charcoal fire. And John tells us that it was in front of a charcoal fire that Peter denied Jesus 3 times. His shamefulness and the need to be forgiven swells inside of him, Yet, when Jesus approaches Peter, there's no mention of forgiveness. We don't hear Peter saying, "I'm sorry," or "Please forgive me." Jesus doesn't demand an apology. "Peter, you need to apologize now." Jesus doesn't threaten retribution. Jesus was not interested in receiving forgiveness. He was more interested in renewing Peter's love. Jesus asked, "Do you love me more than these?" The word for love that is used in the Greek in this passage is agapo, which means a strong divine love, a love that exists at all cost, a self-sacrificial love. Yet Peter's response in these phrases, the term he uses for love in response to Jesus, when he says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you," Peter is using a completely different term for love, phileo. And the term phileo is affinity, friendship, and fondness. Jesus, after asking the second time, using the word agapo, realizes perhaps what he may be asking of Peter is too much. So he asks the question one last time using Peter's word, phileo. And it's this invitation. Jesus meets Peter's level of love. Peter realizes he has been forgiven at that moment for what may have seemed or what may appear to be unforgivable. With these words, the Lord stoops down to meet him. You have the divine meeting the human. And Peter, realizing this, that Jesus accepts him for who he is and the love that he possesses, sheds tears of repentance. Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI says, "It is exactly this divine conformity that gives hope to the disciple who experienced the pain of infidelity. From here is born the trust that makes him able to follow him to the end." In this exchange of reconciliation, Jesus calls Peter out from his shame and invites him again to experience true solitude, not loneliness, true vulnerability, true union. He calls us forth with the same invitation, whispering in our ear, "Do you love me?" In committing our love for Christ, we release ourselves from the shackles of shame. And being released from these shackles of shame, we come to live a more authentic human life in the way God has designed. And the sacraments pave the way to perfect this love. Daily Eucharist is a reminder of the sacrificial love we are called to practice. Receiving his body and blood, we configure ourselves to Christ. In the sacrament of reconciliation, we experience the same love and mercy that Peter received as he spoke with Christ. Through these sacraments, we avail ourselves to the free outpouring of grace, his divine mercy. Through Peter's experience, we have a greater understanding of what it means to follow Christ. As Christ tells Peter, when you were younger, you used to dress yourself and go where you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. We must be willing to let go of our personal desires, our egos, our demands, and make ourselves an offering to God. This is the complete and unconditional love that Christ asked for. But our love will always be imperfect, but it must be firm, trying to grow that love always and never losing ground. Jesus commands Peter, along with us, to follow him. Or rather, the way it's phrased can be said, keep following me. We made a promise to commit our lives to Jesus at our baptism, and we reaffirmed it through our confirmation. But like Peter, we will screw up. We will experience that shame. But by his grace and our love for him, he will pick us right back up so that we too may keep following him. On a personal note, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to be here at this parish. I will be graduating next week and then being ordained into the priesthood May 27th. So this is my last opportunity to preach to you. So I thank the staff. I thank all of you for listening to me and the opportunities you have received me, you've allowed for me. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for joining us for this celebration of the Mass. This virtual Mass is broadcast to hundreds of people every day of the week. You know, over 100 years ago, the very first celebrations of the Mass took place on the second floor of the Glenview Public House. It's been inconceivable that 100 years later, we would be reaching so many people all over the world through this technology. If you'd like to support the ongoing broadcasts of OLPH's Masses, please go to our website, go to Give Central, and you'd be able to support the ongoing outreach of this virtual ministry. Thank you for your support. Most of all, thank you for joining us in prayer. God bless you.